Welcome to uARFIDwhatueat, a channel where we deal with some of the issues that somebody with avoidant restrictive food intake disorder deals with on a daily basis. My name is Chris. Today we're going to be picking up where we left off in the last video, where we did a taste tier list. And I tried to lay out kind of my general overview of how I feel about certain tastes. Today is part 2 of that. Today is going to be the texture version. I'm going to be taking 25 textures, and I'm going to be separating them into tiers. In the A tier, we have textures that I'm really positive about. In the B tier, we have foods that I'm generally positive about, but might have an occasional issue with. In the C tier, we're going to be having neutral flavors, maybe a texture I can at least make a peace with. In the D tier, we're going to be having textures that I don't like, but I don't hate. And in the F tier, we're going to have textures that I just can't handle, and I really don't like, make me sick. So yeah, I have 25 adjectives to describe textures, and we're just going to hop right into this. Got my lists of textures here, so here we go. First texture on the list, we have sticky. Sticky I can go either way with, because on one hand, I don't really like when a food is sticky and it gets gross on my fingers or anything like that. But I do like sticky rice, like plain white rice that is nice and sticky and done properly. That's something I go for. And for that reason, I'm going to be putting this into the C tier. Number 2, we have mushy. Mushy is a texture I really don't go for in any context when I'm eating. The mouthfeel of mushy is gross. It's a yucky texture, so we're gonna put that into the yucky space of F tier. Number 3, we have crumbly. When I think of crumbly, I think of like the way a cookie can get, when they kind of just break into little pieces in your mouth. As somebody who doesn't like dealing with food too much when it's in his mouth, I want it to go quickly. Crumbly helps with that because it means I have to chew less. So crumbly, I'm going to put you in B tier. Number 4, we have runny. But when I think of runny, I think of basically like a food that's wet and drippy kind of. Textures I'm really not into, so runny, you're going into F. 5, we have whipped. So I'm thinking like whipped cream or like a properly whipped mashed potato, something that has a lot of consistency to it. That's something I usually do like. So you know what? We're going to go ahead and throw that into the A tier. Why not? Number 6, we have gooey. We talked about sticky earlier, but when we talk about gooey, we're talking about drippy and yucky, slimy almost. But it kind of brushes up with like pudding and certain pastries that aren't too bad. So because gooey can be okay in the right context, or like, you know, if the cheese is melted just right, but not too much, I don't like really overly melted cheese. We're not going to throw you right into F, but we'll bump you up into the D tier for gooey. 7, we have chewy. So when we're talking chewy, we're talking something that's going to hang around your mouth for a little while, usually speaking. And that's not something that appeals to me. I'm going to put that in D tier. 8, we have smooth. Smooth is like the definition of a good texture for me. Nice smooth meal is going to be consistent and doesn't fight back at all. That'll come and go so quickly. Smooth like butter, right? So smooth, you're going right up into A tier there, straight to the top. Number 9, we have dry. Now dry is interesting because often you'll hear a food described as dry, and you know that's kind of used as a negative thing. But often dry is against wet or moist, and when something's like wet, it's kind of gross for me because I don't want that flavor kind of spreading through my mouth. When I think of dry, I tend to think of like blander foods, and bland can be a good thing for me. So dry, even though you can be a problem sometimes, you can be all right too. So I'm putting you into the C tier. Number 10, we have the arch nemesis of dry, wet. Wet is a terrible texture. I don't like it. When a food is wet and drippy and it's just kind of running everywhere, it means it just explodes into your mouth all over the place. Or it's a food that's been like sitting in the fridge too long or something and it starts getting sweaty and drippy. It's just, that's gross. Not for me. Wet, F. Number 11, we have lumpy. I group kind of lumpy in with mushy a little bit there, where it's like almost smooth, but not. It's like you're about to enjoy this fun, smooth experience, and then you get these gross lumps. Makes you think of mashed potatoes that weren't mashed enough. Don't like that. So lumpy, you're going into F. For 12, we have fizzy. Fizzy makes you think of like a nice carbonated drink, where it's nice and poppy and bubbly on the top there. I like that feeling. It kind of has this fun quality almost, is the best way I can think of describing it. And I can see how fizzy would seem too much, but fizzy is like just right for me. But that also depends on context. If it's too fizzy and it goes too far, I don't like that. So because it can be mostly good but isn't perfect, we're going to throw fizzy into the B tier. Number 13, we have rubbery. Rubbery is a pretty gross texture. It's a food that just fights in your mouth and it won't go away. Not a good texture, so rubbery, F. For 14, we have spongy. When I think of spongy, I think of like a cake, bready, but kind of foamy almost quality to it. I don't tend to like that. Like when I go to someone's birthday or something and they have the birthday cake, I might like eat a little bit of the icing usually, but I'm not a big fan of the actual spongy cake part. Never have been. I've gotten better with it over the years, but I still wouldn't say I like it. So for that reason, spongy is going to go into the D tier. Number 15, we have creamy. So creamy is kind of like smooth if you like add milk. That's kind of how I think of it anyways. It's mostly good, but it can be a little too milky sometimes, so it really does depend on context of creamy. I'd put that into B tier. Number 16, I have juicy. Now juicy is an adjective that's usually described as a positive. People like a nice juicy food. And it's got that burst when you bite into it and it's like, so juicy. I usually don't like that actually. I don't like when a food just kind of explodes my mouth like that. And that's what I think of when I think of juicy, is like biting into a fruit or something and it just goes or just kind of explodes. Not for me, a little too much. But on the other hand, some foods, if they don't have any juicy quality to it, they just could become too dried out and just not that good. So I'm gonna put juicy into, say, C, right in the middle there. For 17, we have airy. Airy I tend to like because that when something's airy, it means that it's not gonna be a struggle to eat. Usually, it's usually kind of light and goes down simple. And going down simple is so often what I ask of a food, especially a texture. I'd say it's a texture that generally makes a food better, 9 times out of 10, so put it into A tier, why not? You know what, A. 18, we have stringy. Stringy is one of my lowest of all tier textures. I hate stringiness in food. I find it so gross. Hate when you bite something and it just strings and gets stuck in your teeth and has this just almost muscly quality to it. I just can't stand it. I want to put this below F. But since we only have F, I'm just gonna huck that right into F. But like say F is the garbage can, I'm gonna pick the garbage can up and put it on top of stringy. Stringy sucks. For 19, we have gritty. Gritty tends to like be so close to like a smooth, creamy flavor, but it kind of has a bit of granular quality to it, which for me can feel like there's like an additional texture that's being snuck into this food that I'm enjoying. And I don't really like that. But on the other hand, like a bit of grittiness in the right food. Like I used to eat this cream cheese I would put on a bagel, and it kind of had this gritty, granular quality to it, and I really liked that. But generally speaking, I feel like that's on the rare side of how gritty tends to work with food. Usually it just kind of feels like you got like this dirt or sand in your food or something. Don't like that. So because it occasionally has a saving grace, I'm going to bump it from what would probably be F tier up to D tier. 20, I have oily. Oily is another one of my low tier textures. I hate the texture of oiliness. If a food has a lot of oiliness to it, it's basically just get it off my plate. Not going to happen. Oil tends to be dripping with flavor and tends to like have this punchiness and this gross just like hang around, overpowering everything else quality to it. Don't like that whatsoever. Oil is no good. It's going into the trash can that we call F tier. For 21, we have moist. Now, moist could be seen as wet probably, but when I think of moist, I think more so like a slightly less wet version. Say like earlier when I was talking about spongy, like a cake, that cake is probably going to have a certain degree of moistness to it, or it's going to be so dry you can barely eat it basically. It's still not a quality I look for in foods usually. I generally don't like wetness or moistness in any kind of thing, but in certain foods it's almost necessary to be able to even tolerate it. Otherwise it'll just be too dry. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it into D tier. Almost like a necessary evil of sorts. For 22, we have crunchy. So when I think of crunchy, I think of like the crust of a bread or like potato chips. That's a texture I really do go for, but it is easy to over crunch something to the point that like you can't really eat it and now you're fighting with it in your mouth for a while. Since crunchy can be inconsistent, I would want to put it into A, but I'm going to put it into like a high B tier. For 23, we have greasy. Grease is disgusting. I hate it. Hate greasiness in food. Not for me. So gross. When I eat a food and it's like dripping in grease and all of like the essence of that food is coming out of it, and it's just so high-powered flavor-wise. Not for me. When I see grease on a food, I get disgusted. Grease, you're going into the F tier. This F tier garbage can's getting a little full, I gotta be honest. For number 24, we have flaky. So you're talking like flaky, like a pastry, like a croissant. It kind of breaks off into little pieces in your mouth. I like that. I like that flaky foods tend to, they break up fairly easily, but they also tend to be fairly layered. So like you're getting all these series of layers, you're getting hits of something, and I don't know, I don't always like that. I find a lot of foods that are flaky, I don't tend to like them. It feels like one of those things that I should like, but in my experience of having flaky foods, I just don't tend to really enjoy it that much. But I like the idea of it, and when it does work, it does kind of work. So to that end, I'm gonna put it into the C tier. And last but not least, we have number 25. Crispy. Crispy is one of my favorite textures. It's kind of like crunchy, but lighter. Like crunchy and airy combined. A nice crispy meal is something that kind of just pops like little bubbles and just bursts real easily and it just goes down so simple. It's like the solid version of fizzy, where fizzy would be for a drink. Crispy has that quality and I love it. Not many times I don't like the texture of crispy, so you know what? Crispy, you're pretty good. I'm gonna put you into the A tier. And there you have it, folks. We have 25 textures laid out for you here. Much like the taste version of this tier list, you're gonna notice that there's more F's and D's than there is A's and B's. That brings us back to the point of this channel. That's the whole reason we're talking about ARFID in the first place, is that people of ARFID, these are the things they struggle with, textures and tastes in particular. They tend to be a very big problem for some of ARFID. What's that food gonna taste like? What's that food gonna feel like in my mouth? Am I even gonna be able to eat it? Am I gonna spit it out? I spit out so many foods because I couldn't stand the taste or the texture was awful. Like it was basically a tradition for me for a long time to try food out, run to the bathroom and just spit it out because it was too much for me. That's why you'll notice with tastes and textures that it tends to skew negative a lot of the time because my experience with a lot of tastes and textures is generally negative. And that's why when I do find a taste and a texture I like, I cling to it for dear life and I just eat that basically. But yeah, that's my texture tier list. Now let me know your thoughts in the comments if you have any opinions on that. So we've done taste and we've done textures. Smells next. This is uARFID What You Eat. My name is Chris, and I really appreciate you spending time with me as I went through my texture tier list today. And hopefully, yeah, we'll catch you next video for the smell tier list. Take care. Bye-bye.